Welcome to Chatting GPT, the podcast where we explore the fascinating world of generative AI and its impact on the way we work. I'm your host, Mary Rose Lyons of the AI Institute, and I'll be your guide as we meet some interesting humans who are leading the way in bringing AI to the workplace. Today, I'm joined by Marie Toft, a woman who, along with her co-founders, is on a mission to bring kindness, compassion and humanity to content and communications through their groundbreaking AI. As a psychotherapist and veteran content creator for TV, she's the brains behind the Maura and Dahi show. Marie brings a fascinating blend of psychology and communications expertise to the business of making AI more emotionally intelligent. Marie Toft, CEO and co-founder of Emotionise, you are very welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Mary Rose, and thank you very much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So look, there's one word I've heard bandied about so much in more recent years, and that word is human. Can we go just straight in with something deep and meaningful? And can you share your thoughts with me on what it means to be human in this day and age?
Gosh, that's very deep and philosophical, but I'll certainly give it a go. So I suppose I'd come back to the whole idea of emotional intelligence, really, when it comes to being human, because that's my expertise and that's what we've trained AI to be. Emotional intelligence is, for years, was seen as a kind of a soft skill, and and actually, what I find very interesting from the kind of the whole gender stereotype thing, quite often it's seen as a female skill, which I think is really misplaced. Actually,
I agree.
I would argue emotional intelligence is a power skill. And in fact, as AI becomes more and more part of our lives, that level of humanity and emotional intelligence is going to become, I would argue, even more important. And, the stats on emotional intelligence are fascinating. Those of us who exhibit emotional intelligence are far more likely to be successful, both in our careers, in our relationships, and so on. So I think I would argue, actually, the core for me of emotional intelligence, there's lots of different definitions, certainly the way we've trained AI, is the empathy part, Mary Rose. I think that's the humanity. When we talk about humanity, quite often it's interchangeable with the word empathy. And it's being able to put ourselves in the shoes of other people and, put aside, or not even put aside, but stop prioritizing how we feel about everything all the time, how it's affecting us, and actually start to look around and realize that to be human is to suffer, and everyone is going through something, and to realize we are not alone. And I would argue that's what being human is, really.
So how do you go about building empathy into AI? Like, where do you begin?
Where do you begin? Yeah, it's a really good question. And so, I mean, I decided to train artificial intelligence to be emotionally intelligent back in 2020. And that's a long time ago, as you well know, Mary Rose, in AI terms,
Light years, light
light
years.
years, exactly. So as you mentioned in your intro, my background is, communications, really. I worked for years as a journalist, starting with the BBC. I worked for SBS Australia. I was on air for a few years
Oh, I
today FM.
love SBS Australia. That was my favourite channel when I lived over there.
Really? Oh, that's
Yeah.
lovely to know that you're familiar with it. I went to Australia. I was working for the BBC, and I went on my own. I got off the plane. It was an itch I had to scratch, and I actually didn't think I'd get any work in broadcasting, because I didn't know anything about Australian politics or Australian government. I was kind of on a year out. And then I ended up with a job in SBS Australia, because I had been working
Cool.
covering the peace process for the BBC in Dublin and Belfast, and I ended up covering the Good Friday Agreement from Sydney, which
Oh,
was fantastic.
fantastic.
Yeah, for SBS
Yeah.
Australia. But then I came back to Ireland, and I joined, worked for Today FM for a while, joined RTE, and became a senior TV executive producer in RTE Cork. So I'm speaking to you today from Cork. I'm from Cork originally. We moved back, myself and my husband. And as you said, I set up the Today Show with Maura and Dahi, and did the John Creedon shows, the Wild Atlantic Way, the Epic East, all of those shows. Well, actually, those shows were really important in my journey to become a CEO of an AI company, because when I made those shows, they had a really big impact. I mean, Wild Atlantic Way particularly sold all over the world, was nominated for awards. And I realized that was my USP, was actually finding that emotional connection through communication and through telling stories. So I left RTE, went back to, as you said, to train as a psychotherapist. And I realized, actually, that's when I discovered more about emotional intelligence, and I discovered about the neuroscience behind emotional intelligence. And our emotions are the barometer for the way we navigate our world, and they're very important, and they should never be ignored. And we make decisions based on our feelings. And I realized the power of this and how when you use the right communication, you can target people's concerns and desires, because that's how we make decisions. Then I decided to digitize this process, the Emotionise process that I built, and that's when I decided to train AI to be emotionally intelligent. So back
How
in
do you
20,
do that? How
I
do
know,
you train AI to be emotionally
emotionally
intelligent? Like, how
intelligent.
would you even begin? Like,
So basically what I discovered was, so GPT-3, which is the forerunner of ChatGPT,
yeah.
was released in June of 2020, and I saw it then, and I thought, this is going to change everything, and this will allow me to build it. Before that, I wouldn't have been able to build it, because the secret to training AI to be emotionally intelligent is data. So, and you know this, every time we talk about generative AI, we come back to
What's
data.
it trained on? Yeah.
Exactly. So what are these large language models trained on? And so I'd started back in 2020. We didn't even call it generative AI. We called it natural language processing, or machine learning, or sentiment analysis. So we started working with OpenAI in 2020, when we were one of the first startups in Ireland to start working with OpenAI.
Wow, great.
Well over a year before ChatGPT was released, we were training AI to be emotionally intelligent. And so what we discovered, we have a wonderful advisor. We're a startup. We have a wonderful advisor who's head of AI with UC Berkeley, and he was really pivotal. And what he said was, when it comes to the future of generative AI is niche. And Sam Altman has actually said this. And what you're looking at now, and even the way AI is evolving, is you're looking at people with strong domain expertise who are able to use quality data to train large language models. And that's exactly what we've done. And he was the first person to say to us, when it comes to fine tuning AI like this, it's actually not about the quantity of the data, it's about the quality. So we have developed it's interesting. I was talking to to lawyers today, because we're protecting this obviously under trade secrets, and we're in that process of protecting it. It's about how you create the data, and it's about how you train the AI, and it's constant nuance, it's constant experimentation, it's constant testing. But basically, unlike a lot of Gen AI companies, Mary Rose, we create our own data. So we have a team of writers who write for us. When they come to write for us, we test them on their emotional intelligence levels and their writing skills. And only 30% of those writers pass that test, which is really interesting, because scientifically, only 36% of us are actually emotionally intelligent.
Wow,
So this is
that's
unscientific, but it mirrors exactly the same thing. So we have this very
Are there,
sophisticated labeling system where we label the
yeah.
data, and that's how we've done it.
Wow. Oh, right. Okay. And then I was just going to ask you there, are there any online tools that you'd recommend for anyone who's listening to test their emotional intelligence to find out if they're in 36% or not?
That's a really good question. Actually, you have to be really careful. And if you look even at the EU AI Act, and when we demonstrate and I'll talk a little bit more about our
I was
product
going
now.
to talk to you about the EUAI Act, because this
Yeah,
is going out in February, and February
yeah,
is the month. So
it
talk to me
is.
about
Yeah,
emotion and AI
emotion
and
and AI,
EUAI Act.
and if you look at the EU AI Act, this is really interesting. And you look, so for example, I remember seeing a documentary a few years ago about where we are. This is about 3 years ago now, which is a long time in AI terms. And it was about AI, and the title of it was, "Are You Scared Yet Human?" You don't mess around with titles like that. Are you scared yet human? And they were talking about China, actually, and they were talking about how China's, really has bet the house on
Very,
AI, as
very
you're probably
involved.
aware.
Yeah, yeah.
And they don't have to deal with all these pesky, and I'm using that in
Not
inverted
spying on
commas,
your citizens and
human
the
rights
like.
issues that we that
Those
we in
pesky human rights. I know, yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
that we in Europe do.
So
But
they've done a lot probably with
they have,
manipulating emotions.
and they have, according to the BBC, the documentary that I made, and I need to be careful here. They were talking about systems whereby someone would have to sit down and they would see emotions on their face and lock them up before the person has ever even said anything. So you have to be very careful when it
Black
comes to people's
Mirror.
emotions and how exactly, yeah. So if you look at the EUAI Act, the way, Mary Rose, you know this really well, it's
Four
divided into
different
all
types of
risks,
risk. Yeah, yeah.
and unacceptable risk, high risk, acceptable risk, and low risk. And actually, the kind of analysis of emotions and telling people where they are in an emotionally intelligent quadrant in a work
Unacceptable.
situation,
No
unacceptable.
way.
Absolutely no way.
Actually,
So
could I just say you're the first person on who's actually kind of engaging in that part of the four risks. Most people who we're speaking to, like, they might be a high risk or they might be a low risk, but you're the first person on who's actually created something that would be deemed to be in that critical do
well,
not
it
go
is
there.
depending on how you use it. So, for example,
Right.
if we were to use something where it would give you an audit on your emotional intelligence I think that's a completely unacceptable risk
I agree.
because, whereas what we do is we have harnessed and democratized the power skill of emotional intelligence, and it's there as a kind of a cognitive collaborator to help you to be more emotionally intelligent. But if we were to reverse that and go, Joe in accounts has no emotional intelligence.
Joe's
Yeah,
not very emotional
exactly.
intelligent. Joe's our
But
producer, by the way. So Joe, if you're listening,
Joe, I've spoken to Joe. You've
you
loads of
can't do
emotional
anything
intelligence.
about this
Joe,
because we're live.
you're in the 36% who are emotionally intelligent. But
So
so you have to be very careful. But that's not the way we've developed our AI.
not at all. So
No.
question though. So okay, so you've created this cool tool called EMUR.
Yeah,
EMUR, great. And EMUR stands for the EI of emotional intelligence, right?
that's it. The first three letters
Great.
stand for emotionally intelligent model. Yeah, EMUR.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
So EMUR, what does EMUR do? So EMUR plugs into an enterprise system
that's
and
it.
supports staff who may not be in that 36% to be more emotional intelligence like,
That's
correct?
exactly it. So, not all of us, as we've established, have emotional intelligence, and it makes a huge difference in how we communicate with people. So, what EMER is doing is almost like your spell check. We've
Yes.
built a Microsoft
Ah,
Outlook plugin, we've built a Gmail Chrome plugin, but we can integrate into any tech stack and be an API call. So, as you're writing, it's live, it's dynamic. We call it a cognitive collaborator. It's
brilliant.
moving in, and if it spots a sentence that could really upset an employee, a colleague, and particularly a customer, we're getting real traction in customer support. It'll move in and it'll give you an audit intuitively on your communication, and it'll actually tell you why this could cause a problem. So you're actually getting live kind of training on the job going, look, we suggest you could make this a little bit more empathetic. If you keep going this way,
I'd
the
love to
person might
test
feel
it.
dismissed. Oh yeah, no, it's
I just
working.
laughing here.
Yeah,
I'd love
yeah.
to test it like by doing something like, "Hey, you mofo! If you don't pay me within 3 days," and then see what it comes back with.
Oh, it's
Hi,
wonderful.
friend.
Yeah.
I'd really appreciate if you took a look at my invoice.
Well, let me give you a really interesting example. So we're
Yeah.
pitching to very large organizations at the moment, and we're, big organizations are interested in what we've built because we're saying we can move the dial on NPS and CSAT scores because at the moment, customer support is very reliant
What's
on
CSCAT? CSCAT.
CSAT, customer satisfaction scores,
All right,
CSAT.
okay. Yeah.
So basically,
NPS is Net Promoter Score.
net
Yeah.
promoter
We
scores,
score very
exactly.
highly at the AI Institute for that. Like we average 85 to 90, and I just took that as normal.
Well, that's
Yeah,
really
and
good.
then I found out that's really high. I
That's
think
really high.
65 is
Fair
the
play.
highest.
That's
But
really good, Mary
I
Rose.
don't take full credit for that though, because you see, it's like we're showing people around AI. So like AI take a bow. It's not just the quality of
It's
our
the way you tell it to.
courses.
It's the way you
Thanks
communicate
a
it to.
million.
It is. It is. No, definitely.
Cheers.
No, that's really good. So at
Thank
the
you.
moment, good customer support is completely reliant on training and recruitment. Whereas what we're saying is we're your cognitive collaborator. And training recruitment, you can put a lot of money into it, but it will let you down because we're all only human and we will make mistakes. And someday we will annoy a customer. Even those of us who have emotional intelligence, you could have had a row with your teenager and you're just having a bad day. Whereas EMER will move in before the communication is sent. So it's live, it's kind of stopping the problems before they start. But I decided to test it recently. And what I did was, do you remember a few weeks ago in the general election campaign, and Michael O'Leary made the comments about teachers?
Yes.
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 So I thought, right, Emer, let's see what Emer says about the teachers. So I went back and I watched his live launch of Peterburg's campaign and wrote
So
down the.
Would you say Michael O'Leary's in the 36%?
I don't know. I think Michael O'Leary doesn't really care which percentage he is. That's my
Exactly.
that's my impression.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
put them in, and Emer came back about the comment about the teachers, spotted it straight away, and said, "This, if you continue with this comment, it is in danger of undermining teachers, and teachers could get annoyed."
Wow,
And
great.
then it came up with an emotionally intelligent replacement sentence, and what it said was, teachers have a lot of very valuable skill sets, and they are really valuable, but this, getting things done or action points may not always be one of them. And so what EMER doesn't do is it never change the facts of the sentence, but it'll say it in a more emotionally intelligent and more diplomatic way.
Fantastic. You're kind of speaking to one of my fears one of my fears with the whole rollout of AI is that there's going to be less graduate jobs in the future because, this whole learning on the job, we don't really need as many people to learn on the job and do those kind of tasks because we can get AI to do it. And it's been one of my fears, like where do humans go to learn how to be like human beings working in a workforce with other people. So I'm kind of thinking EMUR would be a really good, valuable addition to that, where, if people are coming in to do particular roles and they're not having the years of learning on the job, they could come straight in and then learn how to be human and empathetic
Yeah, and
with,
actually,
with
you're
prompts.
you're dead right. And
I like that.
we pitched to this large tech company, and they were saying this is really interesting. They were saying a lot of their support engineers, particularly during the pandemic, were working from home and didn't
Yeah.
have that kind of life experience to be able to turn around to another engineer and go, I
Is
got a
this
tricky
okay?
customer here.
Yeah.
Is this okay? And EMER fills that gap. But and actually, they said something really interesting. They were saying when a customer approaches them, they have two issues going on: the technical and the personal. And what they discovered is sometimes their engineers solve the technical, but don't solve the personal, and their NPS scores are low. But sometimes they solve the personal and not the technical. They might have to come back and solve the technical, and their NPS scores are high. And this is why the value of connecting with customers is so important. The personal will win every time, even if your
Yes.
issue isn't resolved. And that's the power of EMER. Yeah.
And also people will remember you for how you make them feel, not what
Well,
you think
that's
of
my
them.
favorite quote, ma'am.
Yeah.
Mary Rose. So it's Maya Angelou is a big hero of mine, the civil rights activist in America
Yeah.
and the poet. And she said, "I've learned that people will forget what you did. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how
Remember
you made them
how you make
feel."
them feel. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
I was at an
absolutely.
event in November. I don't know if you're familiar with Congregation. It's in Kong. Oh my goodness, I will
I
send you a
love
link to
Cog.
it.
It's
Oh,
beautiful.
I love Kong. The
Yeah.
last weekend in every November, a great man called Owen Kennedy runs an event called Congregation, and it's an unconference where instead of blagging your way in, you blog your way in. So
Oh, I
everybody
like
has
it.
to write a blog post on the theme. And then the whole event is basically where you're in huddles with different people and everyone's kind of riffing on their take on the theme. And the theme in 2024 was legacy.
Okay.
And what was really interesting, there was a lot of conversations about legacy is about how you make, my takeaway was legacy is about how you make people feel. So women will be remembered for being a great mom because they were like my mum, for example, passed away. And I
Oh,
would remember for how she made me feel. There's no
yeah,
building named after her.
yeah.
So, is the legacy of how you make you feel more important than the legacy of stones and bricks and mortar?
It's back to your first question. It's what makes us human. What is that
Yeah,
humanity? Yeah, and
exactly.
that's so I agree with you wholeheartedly on that.
Well, I'm glad
Yeah,
we've got one question answered. Let's move on to my other question, which
yeah,
was okay. I want to ask you the question about AGI, artificial
yeah.
general intelligence. Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, artificial general intelligence will occur when AI can potentially think and reason like a human and learn like a human. So, I wanted to ask you, Marie, what are the ethical implications of this and how can EMER help, I suppose?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Mary Rose. And the longer I work in AI, and I've been training AI for over 3 years now, and effectively we have managed to codify human behavior. And people even get a fright when they hear that. And do you remember years ago when we were talking about AI, everyone said, "Oh, it won't touch creativity, and it won't
What was the
touch
first thing?
emotional intelligence." And
Yeah,
actually, here we are. And in
yeah,
fact, what I
hello.
find fascinating about AI is actually the creative industries is the first place where we're seeing that kind of that impact on employment actually. Now you like my sister-in-law is a freelance graphic designer in California. Her work has dried up, and this is very real. This is happening now. So let's talk about AGI, like you said, that is extraordinary stuff, and I find AGI very interesting. So at the moment, as you know, AI will only do what you tell it to do. It will only do what you tell it to do. It does not. People think it thinks. It does not think. It is only trained on the data. It doesn't
Yeah,
have feelings. It doesn't think. It's totally all about the data, as we know because we train it. But AGI, what I find fascinating about AGI is no one knows when it's going to happen. So some people are saying 5 years away, some people are saying 25 years away, but it's a bit like a black hole. And I find that a bit worrying, frankly, as
I
someone
don't
who's a
think
member of
20 years is a
society.
realistic number. I don't
I
think
think it's
20
going to
years.
be sooner than 20 years. I agree with you,
Yeah,
but nobody knows for certain.
yeah,
Nobody
yeah.
really knows. And
Dario Amodei, who's like the CEO of Anthropic, he came out in his 5.5 hour interview with Friedman at the end of 2024, and he kind of said he thinks 2026 to 2029.
well, that's not that far away. Sure, it isn't. And that's why I actually feel if we are going, it's funny. It's not even if we are going to embrace AI. we have to, the AI train has left the station. The
You
worst thing
bet.
you can do is ignore it, you know.
Yes.
And I always say,
You
just,
will fall off the cliff in
well, you will fall off the
2025
cliff
if you
eventually.
continue to ignore it.
You
That's our
will.
mission
Oh
at
no,
the
it's
AI
and
Institute. It's like
abs-
helping
good.
people to move, like get into the like free flowing water, get in,
Get
grab a
in.
raft, move. Just do not stay on the bank anymore because you will
No,
drown.
you will drown. Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And that's where we are. So AGI, so it's not like if we want to embrace these models that we will not have a choice. That's what's
Yes.
happening. It's happening. And that can be very, very frightening for people. And I see
Hmm.
it all the time as we roll our product out. But we have to make them human more rather than human less. I think that is really, really
Mm.
important. You know, I think we're being disingenuous saying it's not going to have an impact on jobs. I think we're being very disingenuous saying it's not going to have an impact on society and education, to your point about the graduates. But
Mm.
if we are going down this road, we need to make them human more rather than human less.
I
And I
like that.
suppose that is what we're doing at Emotionise.
That's fantastic. One last question before we wrap. If you could teach AI to have one purely human trait with no limits whatsoever, what would it be and why?
Well, I
It's
suppose, I
like a
mean,
kind of if AI could do anything, what would it be?
gosh, because we've already taught it to have emotional intelligence. I mean, we've already
Tick.
taught it to do that, you know. I think kindness, particularly. I'm a
Lovely.
big fan of kindness. I think it's
Yes.
always underrated, and it is a hugely valuable attribute in society. And if
Yes.
you know, like I said, without wanting to be too philosophical, life is about struggle. But when people are kind, it's back to that whole idea of how you make them feel. I think it would be an extraordinary ability to be able to have that because we
Oh,
all
that'd
need
be
some more
wonderful.
kindness in our lives.
Oh, lots of kindness. Bring on the kindness. Marie Toft, you have been absolutely brilliant. It's been a pleasure having you on Chatting GPT. Thank you so much for coming on. When people want to follow up with you, where do they go? Where will they find you?
Thanks, Marios. So thank you very much. So our website is www.emotionise.ai. Please connect with me on LinkedIn.
Mm.
I'd love to hear from you, as well as obviously running Emotionise. I've had a lot of experience of AI and rolling it out and change management. And back to your point about the fears, so I can actually, we have to jump on this bandwagon. So if anyone is interested in connecting with me on that, I know a lot about rolling out AI products and getting
You do.
getting getting organizations ready, because about this too. There's a lot of work to do.
There
So
is. But anyway,
thank you.
Marie is a sound person, full of kindness. So if it's the start of the year and you're feeling a little fearful, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and contact Marie. Marie, thanks so much for being on. Really
Mary
appreciate
Rose,
your
thank
time.
you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.